on how the government in France has handled the coronavirus pandemic, we can speak to Ariane Bogain, Senior Lecturer in French and Politics at Northumbria University. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, the coronavirus is a health crisis, but it's also time for governments around the world to speak directly to their citizens. How effectively has the government here in France dealt with this pandemic?
This is a very broad question. I think we can differentiate between the crisis in itself and the post-lockdown. I think the post-lockdown has been managed relatively well, and you could see that the public is behind the plan. Like 55% think that the plan for the post-lockdown is good. What wasn't that good was the initial reaction to the crisis. It was probably, the lockdown was probably carried out too late. And then there was the huge controversy about the mask and the lack of mask. So it's a tale of two halves. The crisis in itself was not great, but the post-lockdown, so far is going well.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about the Stop COVID app, which is set to become operational. If a certain percentage of the French population do not use the app, it's good as useless. From your understanding, of people here in France, do you think people have the trust in such an application, in such technology, rather?
Right. I was desperate to see how many had downloaded it. I think it started today at 12, so I don't know if we already have the figure. I think it created a lot of anxiety, and personally I'm very ambivalent towards it because I find the idea of a state tracking us a bit sinister. However, there are a lot of safeguards that have been put in place, and the fact that the CNIL, the organization that deals with our freedom, gave it the go-ahead is reassuring. But I would still remain very vigilant, and I would want to see whether it's going to be abused, for example, by employers or social pressure to do it. But I'd like to know the numbers of downloads, but because it's so new, we'll probably won't know until in a few days. But I think even if we don't reach the magical 60% of the population, from my understanding, it is a complementary to the track and tracing process that is currently in place. But I would like to see those numbers.
Ariane, like in the United States, where the U.S. President Donald Trump didn't see eye to eye with governors during the lockdown, we had the same thing here in Paris with the mayor of Paris who was vocally butting heads with the government.
Yes, and yes, you're right. And in a way, it's inevitable. And I think in Paris it was about the park and opening the garden, and obviously Paris is still in the orange zone. I wouldn't put it on the same level as what's happening in the US between Trump and the governors. There's been some, little tiff, but
Indeed.
I wouldn't put it on the same, at the same level.
Now, last week when the French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe spoke, he said, now we have the good news, things are relaxing, things are getting better. But then the economic gloom is going to come. What measures, will the government have to put in place to really tackle the devastation that we're staring in the face?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the next big challenge. I think today is a day that brings a sense of freedom, a bit of joy that the worst has passed, but that's the health crisis. And now we're going to have to deal with the economic crisis and even more importantly, the social crisis. And this is going to be hugely difficult. But if nothing is done, then I can guess that comes the autumn, the social situation is going to be very volatile. I don't have the answers to what should be done, but this has now going to be the priority for the government. The health crisis has dwindled. It's still there, but it's not as important. And now it's the economy. And we can see that with the French, because a poll showed that 86% are worried about the economy, and only 67% are worried about the coronavirus. So we can see that there has been a shift, and this has to be now the priority for the government, definitely.
Ariane Bogain, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Now, countries